Okay. Now, tell us about your audiences and what you think. How do you, when you're in front of an audience, David, how do you size them up? How do you know? How can you know what it
Well,
is they want?
the issue, and this is the presentation I've given before, is about how to include everyone in the audience, because the more people you include in the audience, that is including your conversation, and they actually will react and do something about it afterwards, the more likely you are to get more work. So, what do you know about your audience? Well, first of all, you know who has employed you. So, in that case, and for what? So, in some ways, you've got a chance of understanding what it is the audience will already know. And that's crucial, because if you're looking to do things using acronyms, you should always explain for the first time when you use an acronym what it stands for.
Yeah.
For example, the PSA, which I belong to, the Professional Speakers Association, if you mention the PSA to anyone in the medical profession, they think it's a test for prostate cancer. So don't use the word PSA unless you explain it properly. Very crucial. But you can look at an audience and you can tell this. You can see what colour their skin is. You can see what age they are. You can see, possibly by their clothing, how rich they might be. You know from the location where they might be, and you can tell some disabilities, such as they might be sitting in a wheelchair and they're wearing glasses, which means they can't see very well. So you know all that. But what can't you see? Well, first of all, you can't see if someone's deaf. You can't see if someone has neurodiversity. You can't necessarily see if someone is gay or straight. You can't see necessarily if they might be trans. You can't see what religion they are. Certainly, I had an occasion with a friend here who's from Palestine, and we met up, and because I like to assert my own culture, I ordered a glass of wine and a ham sandwich to meet him, and I was quite astonished that he did exactly the same thing. So I asked him, he said, yeah, I can do that because I'm a Palestinian Christian. So don't assume what religion people are just by looking at them, because you might get it wrong. Very important. And if you're looking at, in your slides, you might be using acronyms, you might be using emojis. Emojis, very difficult because they mean different things to different people. So try not to do it.
I definitely don't use emojis in my work, but if I can just come back to the point you made about acronyms, it's a really interesting one. I was presenting at a conference full of accountants, and I was listening to their presentations, and all I heard was this long stream of acronyms that I had absolutely no knowledge of. So effectively what happens is, if you're a lay person, if you're not familiar with those acronyms and their meanings, then suddenly communication stops taking place and you're on the outside.
Oh, you ask. I mean, I had an argument with someone the other week about facilitation, and I'm saying the best thing you can have about a facilitator is they know nothing about the subject, so they can ask the most stupid questions and they don't make assumptions. That went down like a balloon, but it's absolutely the case. It depends on what the audience is. But nevertheless, when you bring a facilitator in, their skill is to facilitate. Then they don't have to know the topic whatsoever. That's the bee in my bonnet.
Okay.
But certainly, go on.
So I was just going to say that I did mention this to the organizer, and I just suggested, would it be possible to have a glossary of terms? Now, I know there's a glossary of terms for accountancy would be about 500 pages, but if he could have just done a scan of those people who were going to be presenting and just asked them, would they be using acronyms? Maybe we just could have had a glossary of terms for the day, because there were a lot of lay people there. It wasn't just all accountants.
I ran a project a long time ago, merger of two companies, and they were trying to define the rules of the technology by merging these two things together. And basically I said, if you can't explain it to me, you can't have it. And that got them on their toes, I'll tell you. It worked really, really well, and I learned a lot at the time. But certainly being able to understand in lay language is very important. One of the key things you have to watch out for about looking at people is their education. What are they likely to understand? Will they understand references to Shakespeare? Will they understand references to Mahler's Ninth Symphony, etc., or will they not? And does it matter? Are you code switching? Are they code switching? Which means they're using a different version of, let's say, English at home than they are at work, which is good for us Northerners. We have to do that. And also, are they American or Brits? Because if I say to someone, that's quite nice, it means it's rubbish. But if an American says that's quite nice, it means it's great. And if Australians say it, I have no idea what it means. So watch out for expressions. Very, very careful. I mean, I like to use expressions, but I think I've learned not to use them, certainly in training, because most of my audience is using English as a second or third language. So I try not to do it. So when you're speaking, watch it for that.
Well, you know, if you work in London, as I do, we have a really, really diverse audience. We have people from all over the world. So something that I've learned over the years is just speaking very, basic English and not use unfamiliar words. So, for example, I would usually say something when when lunchtime is roundabout. I'll say something like, "This would be an advantageous moment to go for lunch." But if I said this would be a propitious moment to go for lunch, I think I'd get a lot of blank looks. So just using everyday conversation. My wife gave me some great advice once, and that was if I don't use language. So my wife is Brazilian, by the way, and she said to me, if I don't use language that is recognised in the the English language exams that you take for proficiency, then she won't be listening for much longer. So I found that was very useful advice. So just find out what's if you're to speak at a high level, just use that language that's appropriate and not use too many idiomatic expressions.
Yes, and if you're doing this training in Manchester, you say, now it's time for dinner, wouldn't you?
That's right, even when it's lunchtime.
So you have to learn all this, you have to know all this. It's very handy.
Exactly. Yeah,
So,
my mother had a lot of idiomatic expressions that it probably wouldn't be advantageous to mention here. But I remember we were in Portugal one day, and the guys in the restaurant, they spoke sort of restaurant English. They were very nice and very pleasant. And my mother was very, very chatty always. She just talk to anybody. And there was this big hill in Albufeira. It's a really, really high hill. And in where she was from, near Preston, they call a hill a brew. And she's talking to these guys saying, my mother was in her 70s, and she's talking to them. She's saying, that is a hell of a brew. How do you get up here every day? And they had no idea what she was talking about.
Obviously, she was talking about making tea.
No, she was talking about the hill. There you go. I still don't know how to spell brew, by the way, although if we're making tea, I do.
Oh, yes, that's a good one. I mean, the other thing you have to really be careful with is when you've got your audience, you have to remember that different kinds of people learn things different ways. Mm-hmm. This comes down to using things like NLP from neuro-linguistic programming, the VAC model, visual. Some people learn by seeing things, others learn by listening, and others learn by doing. That's visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. And so you need things in your presentation which enables all of those things to happen. And I was having a conversation with someone about NLP recently, and they thought I was talking about natural programming language, natural language processing. And of course, in Spain, it's called PNL, just for good measure. So be very careful.
So, as you know, may I just say, yesterday I was judging a speech contest at Warwick University, and it was great. Although I just had one or two problems. In fact, all the judges who were sort of slightly older than the contestants who were sort of, I would say, 19 to 30-ish, they were talking about various memes online and sixes and sevens, and I had absolutely no idea what they were talking about. So I lost those frames of reference, and because of that, some of their speeches didn't really make a great deal of sense because I just didn't get those references. So again, I think they were talking to their audience, but not necessarily to the judges.
Yeah, you have to watch out for that. I'm all sixes and sevens is an old expression, meaning you're in a bit of a state.
I'm okay with sixes and sevens, but like I say, they've got all of these memes and emojis.
I have no clue what 6-7 means. I think nobody else has either. It seems to have gone out of fashion again. But you have to be careful with it.
Yeah. Well, I never use it. I haven't used it for donkey's years. Are we allowed to say donkey's years?
Yeah, donkey's years. That's a good expression.
Donkey's years, yeah.
I wonder who understands that one, but I do because I'm northern.
Northern.
One of the things with the international audiences is you have to decide whether you're going to teach things the Protestant way or the Catholic way. That's my terminology. The Protestant way is this. This is the answer, and this is why. The Catholic way, which is done by France and Spain and Italy and all places further south, is a long story, and therefore this. So it's a completely different way of teaching things. And you have to decide which of those things you're going to operate on. And the big challenges with the second one, which is beloved in Spain, is you've lost the audience if they're all from the Northern Europe. They've lost interest because you've no idea what you're talking about until you get to the answer. So be very, very careful with it. And then we come down to the way people are, which is cognitive diversity. And in reality, some people are more emotional than others. Other people like logic. So if you've got people who are all logical in your audience, it's no use saying, can you imagine this? Because they can't, and they won't. And equally, you work with introverts and extroverts. And the introverts typically like lots of steps and process and logic, whereas the extroverts like no detail whatsoever. I don't do detail at all, and I get bored with it. So you've got this balance, working out from the audience, who's in there, how much detail do you need to go into? And it's a really tricky one. And the best way of looking at that is trying to understand from your audience, are they more scientific or are they more artsy? Because the artsy ones are much more likely to do with emotions. It's very, very bad logic. But the thing that's important is if you're working with someone from a culture, any old culture, and you've got all these stereotypes about the Chinese behave like this, the French behave like that, reality is that only a quarter of them actually behave naturally in the culture they're living in. and they've all learned to behave according to that culture, but it's not natural to them. So that when they change cultures from one to another, then they have to learn different ways of succeeding within the culture they're now in. And another area you have to work with is, of course, is what we call worldview. And is individualism more than collectivism more valued? Is authoritarianism the normal method of management, or do you delegate down to the lowest level? And I spent a lot of time in the Middle East trying to get the decisions at the lowest possible level of seniority, and the management didn't like it because they liked to have the authority, and the junior staff didn't like it because they don't want any authority. So you're imposing Western values on an Eastern culture, and there's absolutely no point in doing it. And then when you come down to this is the global North, these approaches, and you've got all the other ways of working in the global South, storytelling, everything else is ways of learning things and building up connections and cultures. You have to work in the Middle East by building relationships. Without those relationships, you will get nowhere. And one of my friends teaches all about this, and it's really about you have to spend time getting to know people before you'd even think about talking about work. But on the other hand, don't be too much inquiring about families because that's personal. So it's that balance, really hard thing to balance. But be prepared to give yourself a lot of yourself away before people will tell you stuff. And that's how it operates. But if you're in a country where everybody knows their place, like India and the caste system, it's very different to make it. It's very difficult to make it egalitarianism. How do you say that one, Vince?
Egalitarianism.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And so you've got this balance all the time. All these people in the audience, they all think differently. They all react differently. Everything else, just be aware of it. And you can certainly, the number of times when I'm doing training, I ask the organisers, tell me about the people. And they say, oh, no, I'm not telling you that. You've got to make your best guess.
Oh, great.
And you've had that, I'm sure, but I've had it a lot.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's all of my classes, nearly all of my classes are open classes. So that just means usually individuals coming, they may have been sent by their company, they may be sending themselves, and they could, all I know about them when they arrive is their name and email address. So somebody told me something very interesting a long time ago, and that was whoever you're talking to, wherever you're talking to them, talk to them with respect, humility, sincerity, and if necessary, empathy. And
if necessary, empathy. That's interesting. Why not always with empathy?
Well, it depends on the situation. Not everybody needs empathy. I've worked with people, who've had addictions, and there's nothing I can do to help them with their addiction or their past. But what the purpose of the interaction was to try and help them, sort themselves out for today and for the future. So, going back to work, going for job interviews, creating a CV, those kind of things. So, like I say, they tell you all sorts of stories which are kind of sad but fascinating from an outsider's point of view. But like I said, there's nothing I can do about whatever happened to them in the past. So I can empathize with them. I can see where they are today, and I can try and help them in the now for the future. That's what I mean by empathy in those situations.
That's fair enough.
Okay. Right.
So remember this, really, your personality determines how you want to behave, and your culture determines how you should behave. And if you can identify that in the room you're in doing the training, you're doing very well. And you can do that by asking questions in many ways. But certainly all those different points are very, very difficult to balance in your head all at the same time. But the best way of doing all this is ask people, tell me what you know about this.
I think questioning is a great technique for sure. As a presenter, as a speaker, trainer, yeah, asking the right type of questions. Again, the right type of questions, that's subjective as well. But I think what happens is after, if you've been presenting the same thing for a while, you get into a little bit of a rhythm, and you find a few golden seams that you can explore,
Mm.
and that generally, kind of works for most people. Well, it won't always work for everybody, but if you can score with most people, that's a good feeling.
So you should know before you even start doing the presentation, how are the people going to decide if it's good or not? What's the criteria they would use to choose? I mean, I've always done this when I've been consulting. How will you know I've done a good job? And the answer often is they've no idea how they'll know. But it's useful to know they've no idea. Then you can tell them how they'll know.
I think
And
levels of engagement are very important. So for example, in my classes, I try and keep my presentations short, like between 5 and 10 minutes, and then I get them making a speech or a presentation, and then we do feedback. We follow Kolb, and so we've already created some, what should we call them, some guidelines, some theories and principles. Then we
yeah,
practice, then we give feedback, and then we reflect. And if you keep going around that sort of virtuous circle,
mhm.
people get into a rhythm and they feel like they're making progress. And yeah, I really love that work. It's great. It's a great job to see people, you know.
One of the challenges I've certainly had uh, is how many words you put on slides.
Mhm.
Because if you're working with people where English is certainly not their first language, then having words on slides helps them understand. On the other hand, having words with slides is a distraction because they're busy trying to read the slides instead of listening to you. And certainly, I've been to several things in Spain where it's all in Spanish. And if we get presenters who use slides, I stand a reasonable chance of understanding what they're talking about. And if they don't use slides, I have no idea quite often. So it's that balance. It's learning the balance, understanding what your audience is likely to understand. So that's
Yeah.
crucial.
I think that if I went to a presentation in Spanish at the moment, I don't think I would get a great deal from it. I used to speak Spanish really well 30 years ago, but I don't really have a million opportunities to practice these days. Maybe you and I could do some practice together. That would be fun. Although it'd probably end in an argument. I don't know. So,
Never,
so
never. Vince. I would never argue. I don't know. I don't do arguing.
let's hope we never argue.
I, I discuss
So,
I discuss points forcefully, but I don't argue.
oh, that's good. I'm glad to hear that. But yeah, I take your point. If I think slides are useful, I think sometimes slides are overused. I think the other thing. So, for example, working in England, working in London, everybody who comes on my course has a certain level of English. Well,
Mm,
you would think so. So, for example, I got an email the other day saying that this woman would like to bring her daughter. Her daughter was 14. She spoke English very well, but she wouldn't be able to stay with her in the classroom. One, we don't work with children. We work in the corporate sector, if you know what I mean. There's other organisations like Lambda who work with young people, and there's a safeguarding issue. I can't be in the classroom all the time with her. Uh, I've got other things to do,
mm,
so it. I just had to say no. But she said that the girl spoke great English. She'd grown up here, but she said, would it be possible for me to sit in the classroom with her? And again, that's really awkward.
mm.
it's awkward. So we had to say no to that, unfortunately. But
I did a remote course recently
difficult.
from Spain to Saudi Arabia, and there weren't many people. None of them put the cameras on, which is the other challenge. So you've no idea if anyone's there or not. One of them apparently understood English but couldn't speak it. So finally got round that one by asking the question to someone else, and they translated into Arabic.
Yeah.
And then they translated it back to me. Very delaying, but on the other hand, that was the only way to get engagement. So had to be done.
I think if you, for me, if I've got 6 or 7, 8 other people, those delays, I just get a lot of requests for refunds. So it's just, it's not worth, for me, it's not worth, although I'd like to.
Yeah, I mean, all those, in that case, they were all in Mecca. So they were all in different bits of Mecca, but nevertheless, they're all in Mecca. So the comprehension was there, the understanding of the problems. But nevertheless, we did get through all the subjects, and I insisted on carrying on. And if I got I asked the questions, no answers, I just carried on to the next one, because you just don't know who's there.
Okay. All right. Now, David, unbelievably, we have been talking for nearly 55 minutes. This is the longest podcast that I've ever done. So I think what we could do is, have you got a few final words for us to just kind of summarize where you're at and what you're thinking about anything that we've not covered so far in a couple of sentences?
Summarize, really. When you're doing a presentation or training or anything else, take time to investigate your audience before you start building it, before you start building your presentation. Try and imagine what they might know already, what they don't know already, and how they might behave and how they might learn stuff. And that's it. People don't do that. But my recommendation is just do it. And that's it.
Okay.
And enjoy yourself when you're doing it. Tell lots of jokes is the answer.
Talking of jokes, I have a great joke that I need to tell you straight after we've said goodbye.
My joke, I can't put them on podcast, my joke. They're too rude.
It just takes a little while to set the joke up, but I'll explain to you in a moment. So, David, thank you so much for being with us today. Will you just hold on to the line for 2 minutes?
Of course.
And so I can thank you personally. And I just want to announce our next podcast, which will be with Mr. Vincent Merck, a university professor with a long list of professional accolades. Very nice gentleman. Again, we met Vincent in Ben Al Medina, and a very nice character, and I'm sure he's got lots of training insights from his professorship. So that's on Friday, the 27th of February at, I think, 7 p.m. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you then.
Well, thank you for inviting me. And, I can talk about myself indefinitely. You've learned that.
Okay, but we'll carry on in a moment.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.